Welcome back. For those of you who are new, my name is James and I run the Al-Maida Initiative. And I spend a lot of my time talking to Christians about Islam and Muslims about Christianity. We're spending a few weeks talking about the current information crisis in the Muslim world. Last time we were here, we touched on the difficulty of many Muslims in understanding the Qur'an if they attempt to read it by themselves. Most Muslims are not native Arabic speakers, and even if they are native Arabic speakers, the type of Arabic the Qur'an is written in isn't automatically understandable without some discipline and application. Even if you could understand the language perfectly, the Qur'an can still be difficult to decrypt, as there is no narrative to the Qur'an and it's not organized chronologically. The Qur'an in Muhammad's time was believed to be a message from God, but Muhammad did not only function as a reciter of the Qur'an's message, he was the leader and guide to the Muslim community, and he was there to interpret the Qur'an to them and give exegesis. This means that many parts of the Qur'an assume knowledge of context which has to be constructed from external sources like the Hadith, or biographical information about Muhammad. If you start learning about Islam directly from the Qur'an, the religion does not come assembled. At that point, you can either seek the help of a Muslim leader to assemble it for you, or you can try and assemble it yourself. The reason for this is that each part of the Qur'an was discussed between Muhammad and his followers, and those conversations were not chronicled by one person, but collected in the memories of many people who Muhammad surrounded himself with. Let me give you an easy example. In Surah Maryam, ayah 33, Jesus is reported to have said, "Peace be upon the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I will be raised back to life." However, in Surah An-Nisa, ayah 157 to 158, which came about 10 years after Surah Maryam, the Quran denies the crucifixion and claims that Jesus was taken to heaven without dying. As for boasting, we killed the Messiah, Jesus son of Mary, the messenger of Allah, but they neither killed him nor crucified him. It was only made to appear so. Even those who argue for this crucifixion are in doubt. They have no knowledge whatsoever, only making assumptions. They certainly did not kill him. Rather, Allah raised him to himself, and Allah is almighty, all-wise. So one part of the Quran says that Jesus will die, and another part says he didn't die. This isn't seen as a contradiction in Islamic theology. Any Muslim will solve this for you by telling you that in Islam, Jesus will return in Damascus, bring the world to Islam, and live as a Muslim ruler and then die. Afterwards, he will be resurrected with everyone else. However, none of this information is found in the Quran. Jesus dying and not dying are threads the Quran leaves untied for someone else to somehow join them together. The general place Muslims go to solve this is in Sahih al-Bukhari 3448, which explicitly says that Jesus will die and then witness against Christians on the Day of Judgment, saying they should not have worshipped him. Now, not all Muslims believe the Hadith, but if you don't accept this explanation, you need to find or construct another one. Let's move on to another, less loaded example. Let's examine the entirety of Surah Al-Fil. The surah says, "Have you not seen, O Prophet, how your Lord dealt with the army of the elephant? Did he not frustrate their scheme? For he sent against them a flock of birds that pelted them with stones of baked clay, leaving them like chewed up straw." What is this surah referring to? The Quran does not provide any context other than what is written on the page. It expects the reader to recognize the story from some other source of information, and much of the Quran is like this, expecting the reciter of the Quran to possess information that makes sense of the information given. What is this surah referring to? The Quran doesn't provide any context other than what is written on the page. It expects the reader to recognize this story from some other source of information, and much of the Quran is like this, expecting the reciter of the Quran to possess information that makes sense and give context to the information given. In order to understand exactly what the Quran is saying, you often need to ask questions like, what was happening in the Muslim community when this surah was given? Was this in Mecca or Medina? Did Muhammad say anything about this particular surah? If you want to examine what Muhammad himself said and did, you need to go beyond the Quran and look at his biographies or in the Hadith. What you'll find if you dig deep is there is a great deal of data about Muhammad in Muslim sources, and it can be hard to know where to start. Muslims in general do not take the biographies of Muhammad as seriously as Hadith, as when the early biographies of Muhammad were written, Islamic scholars had not fully developed their own science of Hadith, whereas the Hadith has a very specific methodology that Muslim scholars use to judge the perceived reliability of certain traditions. During the Islamic Golden Age, hard-working scholars devoted their time to strenuously going through oral traditions passed down from the earliest Muslims, sifting out ones that couldn't be verified and collecting the ones with the best attestation. The first collection that is universally revered by Sunni Muslims, Sahih al-Bukhari, was completed in 846 AD, 214 years after the death of Muhammad, and over the next 100 years, the 6 main Hadith books of Sunni Islam were codified. I want to give you an idea of the scale of this information. If you are a Christian and you want to read the entire Bible, the Bible is about 760,000 words long. There are 31,000 Bible verses with an average word count of 28 words each, meaning if you read just 800 words a day, you will finish reading the Bible in 3 years. If you spend 15 to 30 minutes a day and read 2,400 words or 3 chapters, you will finish the Bible in 1 year. The Qur'an, on the other hand, only has 77,000 words and 6,236 verses or ayahs, with the average being only 12 words long, meaning that the Qur'an is only 10% the length of the entire Bible. If Muslims' only source of information about religion was the Qur'an, they would have a massive advantage in their ability to comprehensively understand their religion. But once you realize you need information that is not contained in the Qur'an, this becomes more difficult. Sahih al-Bukhari alone has 7,500 hadith, each being 300 to 400 words long, some being much larger. This means that Sahih al-Bukhari is over 1 million words long, being longer than the Bible and the Quran combined. Now remember that in Sunni Islam, there are 5 more collections like that. Keep in mind here that we've only discussed the traditions that were agreed upon as being reliable. Muslim historian Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi said, "I heard Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari say, I compiled my book as Sihah in 16 years. I selected sound hadiths from among 600,000 hadiths." So the writer of Sahih al-Bukhari said to compile that book, he had to read over 600,000 hadith. To feasibly read this many hadith, a person would need reading to be their full-time job, and even then, it would take 15 years, which is exactly how long it took Imam Bukhari. That should tell you how much data is out there on the life of Muhammad in various Muslim sources. But a great deal of that is looked on with suspicion by lay Muslims and scholars alike. Many Muslims would not know where to start if they wanted to really study the Sunnah. The problem this creates is that it can be difficult to tell if a story is true or false. There are many stories about Muhammad from Muslim sources that paint him in a bad light, like the story of the satanic verses, reports of him marrying a 9-year-old girl, reports of him ordering torture, alongside many other stories that paint him as the wisest, most upright, merciful, and generous man who ever lived. When the average Muslim hears these stories, they themselves don't have a framework for figuring out if these stories are true or not. The reason for this is twofold. The first is the amount of time it would take to really study the sources, and the second is that the average Muslim has been told directly on many occasions that they are not qualified to understand the Islamic sources themselves because they are not scholars. Next week, we're going to talk about the final piece of the Muslim information puzzle: the scholars and the Ummah, the community.